Okay, so today we get to pick up where we left off last Sunday morning with a study through Genesis. We noticed there were some things that if you remember, we talked about the morning and evening issue, right? Am I the only one that ever bugged? I'm sure it bugged you too when you read it, right? Then there was evening and morning. Why does evening come before the morning? Well, it does come before the morning, but why does the day begin at sundown? And their whole practice of that began with their being told that there was evening and morning on the first day, the second day, the third, on all the six, by the way, but there was no evening and morning on the seventh day. At least not in the narrative, right? So that was always, well, first of all, I'm bugged by the order of it. And I'm also bugged by the fact that it was only on those 6 days, but not on the day he rested. But then when you get in and you figure, and you get into the language and you discover Erev and Boker, they mean those other, was everybody here last week and you caught this? So you do understand, okay, it was order and chaos. Okay, so there was chaos brought to order the first day. There was chaos brought to order the second day. See, it was like everything, the indescribable, indistinguishable, random everything God created, and the waters were just everywhere and all that. And then he started bringing things into order then. This first day he just declared it to exist, and it was there. Bang. That's the Big Bang Theory. God said, let there be, and bang, there was. All right, So if he had it start with one thing and it went and it exploded outward, and that's why we get this universe looks like that's the way it happened, well, that makes sense. It's logical. It's just that, God did it. It didn't just happen by random chance. Where did the stuff come from? Where did the amino acids that came from the meteor that crashed into the watery earth and caused this stew to start doing all that stuff like they taught us back in science and in school? Where did that come from? Where did the meteor come from? And all the amino acids that were on that meteor? I was always bugged with that. I'm bugged more by the story of evolution and trying to explain creation without a God than I am by the mix-up of the wording and stuff in Genesis. So anyway, in fact, it's really cool whenever I discover that that's what those words mean, and I discover things about that, how it brings it in. Oh, that makes so much more sense, right? So that's what I hope to bring to us each day. God created, bara was created, okay? Not Barack. He was created too, but bara means created. And then Erev was chaos, and order was Boker. Okay? Or Erev can nowadays in more modern Hebrew language means evening, and Boker means morning. Okay, and that's kind of where this all came from. All right, so we did all that, and we even talked about how Elohim, the word that was used for God, the I am ending in the ancient Hebrew, was a plurality, so there's a hint at the Trinity right there. All these cool things. Then God said, let there be light, and there was light, and we talked about that, verses 3 through 5, what was the light? Because the sun and moon haven't been created yet. So where is this light? Well, it's God's light. We're told that God himself lives in unapproachable light in Scripture. So he is light. He's lots of things. He's love too. He is truth. All these things that we're told in Scripture that he is. So, was there light prior to verse 3? Apparently not. Because that's when he spoke light into existence. Let there be light. So, this was one thing that was disordered that was brought into order. Was this, now let's shine a light on it. Right? Okay, so what we're going to see when we get there today, he is going to, we're going to see some more bringing things into order. And on the third day, then he's going to actually put the star in the, was it the third? Well, anyway, let's just go into the second day here with verse 6. Pick up verse 6. And God said, let there be an expanse between the waters to separate water from water. So God made the expanse and separated the water under the expanse from the water above it. And it was so. God called the expanse sky. And there was evening and there was morning the second day. Okay, so to make sense of this at all, waters covered over the earth, right? When he made it, the waters covered the earth. And he said, somewhere in the middle of that water, I want to create air. Called it sky, right? So he made this separation between the water, in the middle of the water. So there was a water around the outside and water on the inside with air in between. That's the way this is describing this. He creates this expanse. This is where things will live. Okay, so we see from this that in the beginning, as this happened here, there was this water that was around. Now, clouds don't accurately do this. You can't say, well, that's clouds, and then there was the ocean, right? No, the clouds don't accurately become, they're not really, there's water in the clouds, but there's all kinds of things, and it's not nearly enough. There was a vapor canopy. This is a theory, okay? I'm presenting this to you as the vapor canopy theory, but it's the only one that makes sense when you read these. There's some theories that come across, and when you've read about them and you understand them, when you read the account of creation, it just makes logical sense then. Lots of things make sense, okay? Water vapor layer in the atmosphere. You know, we have different layers, the stratosphere, the hemisphere, all these different things that they call the layers up there in the sky, all right? There was a layer, I don't know what God called it, but it was a vapor canopy that was surrounding the whole world. There's lots of proof for this in fossil records, in fact. If this existed, there would be this kind of like a layer of water up above there that sunlight could come through, but a lot of harmful radiation that we get from the sun is filtered out by that water. And it also would create a greenhouse effect over the whole globe. And this would explain why, when they go up and they dig up above rim up there and they find fossils up there, they found animals fossilized with vegetation in their mouths and in their digestive tract that's tropical vegetation. And you're like, how that would have never grown up here? You know, so maybe if during the flood, maybe that animal got washed up there or something like that, and your mind starts trying to figure out how that could have happened. But that was a long ways for that stuff to go. And you see that sometimes it was the animals were animals that were suited for polar type climate up in there, and everything, but the plants wouldn't have been. So where did they get it? Was there someone taking it up there and feeding it to them? You know, I mean, way back that many millions of years ago, by the way, like they try to explain. So this is one of these things that points to the vapor canopy theory being a reality. That at this time, prior to the flood of Noah, there was this vapor canopy. And then also the flood of Noah is helped by this vapor canopy collapsing in, and all of a sudden no more filtering the harmful rays, and people don't live as long. Remember, you know, as we read through Genesis, as we get through there, we're going to see how long some people live. That doesn't happen anymore. Not anything near that. In fact, it got down to where, Earth people didn't live a fraction of that long anymore, and we're starting to live a little longer now than they did a couple hundred years ago. You know. So anyway, this water vapor canopy theory then melted in the flood, and also the fountains of the deep opened up. So from both directions during the flood, it rained down all that water, plus water bubbled up from underneath. And that's how it flooded the whole earth. was because of that. And when we get to the flood, when we get to that portion of Genesis, then there's a whole lot of cool stuff that we'll talk about, geography and geology and some things like that that'll come up in the tectonic plates on the earth and those things. We'll get into all that later, though. That's later on in a few chapters down the road. So the filtering effect would have had of the sun's harmful radiation is lost now because the vapor canopy is not there anymore, and so we age faster. So that, and here's another thing that they found. If that vapor canopy had been there, that is weight. It weighs something. It's actually water that was up there. Weight circling the earth like that, pressing down on it with a gravitational pull, would have put pressure on all of the expanse, the air that's in between it, right? We should expect that during that time, the barometric pressure would have been quite a bit higher. So, if there was any evidence that could suggest that back in this time period and everything, that oxygen was richer, that there was more oxygen in the air, a higher concentration, and the barometric pressure was higher during that time, then that would also go to support this theory, right? You ever heard of amber? Amber, little rocks, they look like rock, but actually it's petrified tree sap. That's what amber really is. It's tree sap that has been like petrified or whatever. There's air bubbles in amber lots of times. And they have found old amber that by their dating methods, they say this goes back probably 6,000 or 7,000 years ago, somewhere around that, And that's how old that they say this amber is. Well, a rock that's just a rock, I don't think the radiocarbon dating works very accurately on rocks, but on amber it should be able to, because that's something that solidified and came into being, and you might be able to tell how old it is. So if you could sample that air that's inside there that got trapped in it when the tree sap went around it and everything, what would that air be like? And they have found in these older ones that air that's inside that is of a higher concentration, and also suggests it was a higher barometric pressure that was around it when it was put in there, when they sample that air. So that's kind of cool stuff, right? That only in this century they're discovering things like that. And all this does is help to support what we already know, because we just take it on faith that Genesis creation is correct, because we want to believe the Bible, right? But it really helps when we have science that actually comes along and says, well, yeah, because of such and such, and backs us up. I mean, without faith, it's impossible to please God. So we need something to not be explainable, But when some things start to become explained and boost our faith, that's pretty cool, I think. Yeah.
It was a theory that you have the water being up there, lots of water being up there.
Right.
Then there's less water in the ocean. I'm thinking. So now you have these land bridges possible that we don't have now.
Well, on this day, on the second day, there was no land yet.
Yeah.
But prior to Noah's flood, there was.
Yeah.
But the earth was also more flat. I don't mean flat like it wasn't a globe, but it was more flat. There were not mountain peaks yet that were as tall as they are now. There's another scientific thing I read once that said unless you have mountain peaks that reach in excess of 14,000 feet, you wouldn't have rain. Meteorologists say that. They have to penetrate that certain whatever stratosphere or stratocaster or whatever it is up there, I think in terms of Fender, right? Telecaster, Stratocaster, Broadcaster. All right. Anyway, but unless, had some mountain peaks up there that could penetrate in that, there wouldn't have been rain. Well, guess what? Prior to the flood, there wasn't. There was no rain. So anyway, the geological events that happened during the flood, God pushed up stuff from the deep, and all of this volcanic activity happened, and the waters sprung forth and everything. And then when the earth kind of solidified and came to rest as it was, and the tectonic plates had shifted and all that stuff. We had continental differences and everything that actually can be proven, can be shown to be, yeah, that's probably most likely 90% sure that's what happened. And these mountains grew. There are islands out in the ocean that we've watched grow. They just sprung up out of nowhere and they grew. And they've actually filmed these things since filming has come to be. So that in a short period of time, because of volcanic activity and the Earth's crust kind of doing, earthquakes and opening up and all that stuff, things like that can happen pretty fast. Well, yeah, in 40 days and 40 nights, there was a lot of stuff happening on this earth, that God changed the whole surface of the earth. And it didn't look the same. Nothing really was the same. We named, like 3 of the rivers that were mentioned in the garden and all that stuff are known to be existing now, but were they just renamed? Were they really where they were? Can you go to the Euphrates and find its source and say the Garden of Eden was somewhere here? No, because everything was changed. Mankind just called that river that later because of some people after the flood knew about the river before the flood. Like Noah's kids. Well, let's call that one the Euphrates because that's what we called the one over here before, And so they just named them that and it got passed down. So they're probably not in the same places. So, all right. Anyway, this was the second day, and that's really all we have on the second day, but you could spend a whole, week studying the things that happen in that if you wanted to, but I didn't want to because I want to get through a couple more days today. Okay, so let's go on to the third day, because the third day is pretty cool. They did lots of neat songs. I've met the band. I hung out with Mac Powell a couple of times, Third day, get it? All right, well, whatever. Verses 9 through 13, then, we'll hear about what God did on the third day of creation. And God said, "Let the water under the sky be gathered to one place, and let ground appear." And it was so. God called the dry ground land, and the gathered waters He called seas. And God saw that it was good. Then God said, "Let the land produce vegetation, seed-bearing plants and trees on the land that bear fruit with seed in it, according to their various kinds." And it was so. The land produced vegetation, plants bearing seed according to their kinds, and trees bearing fruit with seed in it according to their kinds. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening, and there was morning, or there was Erev, and there was Boker on the third day. All right, the third day is a special day. It got 2 blessings. Did you notice that? God saw it was good twice on this one. Now, you say, oh yeah, big deal. He just got wordy and he said it twice there. Moses said it twice. Whatever reason it was, there's a double. They're called the day of the double blessing. And to the Jews, that's good enough for them to make this a special day. And they have a lot of weddings among the Jewish people are on Tuesdays, because that's the third day. So they say, oh, let's have a Tuesday wedding because it's the day of the double blessing. So anyway, that's just a kind of a custom that came in those people because of the two times God saw it was good on that creation day. Anyway, let the waters under the heaven be gathered together. The idea is that before this, the earth was covered with water. No land appeared prior to this, God saying this on that third day. Now the waters are gathered together in one place, and dry land appears. Well, He just pushes up some dry land here and there and sucks down some of the land underneath the water to create a trough or whatever, and all of a sudden you got land and seas because water just falls with gravity, right? So how would God do it? That's how He did it, just by manipulating the form of the earth. Now all of a sudden there's dry land and there's seas separated. Was there this one supercontinent that they think? There was one supercontinent and oceans? It's very possible. Very possible, because all the land was gathered, the seas were gathered into one place, and there was a dry land, So it's very possible that other than maybe a couple little islands, that there was one supercontinent. Because it looks like if you take the Western Hemisphere and the Eastern Hemisphere and you get them a little bit closer and you just kind of move things a little bit, they could have all been one supercontinent. And, if things were manipulated. And so during Noah's flood, God did some stuff there and changed it. And now there's two continents. And he wanted to save this one over here on the left for special people. Okay. All this happened before the creation of the sun, the fourth day. Fourth day of creation is the sun and the moon. This means the plants must have had sufficient nourishment because of the light God had created before the sun and the moon, right? Plants have to absorb the rays of the sun because they're like little photocells. All their leaves are like that, and that's how they have to live. But it's only a day. Okay, you can put a plant in the dark for one day and it'll survive. So it's not a long period of time. But if you tried to say, each day was a day age, this is where the day age theory of creation kind of falls apart. Because how would certain things live during that time if there was no sun? How would the plants live? This is one of those things, because one of the theories is, because we have that verse that says, day is as 1,000 years to the Lord, and 1,000 years is as a day, that when he created this in 6 days, he took 1,000 years 6 times for each day. Why did he need so much time? He didn't need 6 days. He could have just said, let there be all of it right now. He was giving us a pattern for our week, is why he took 6 days and a 7th day rest. God didn't need thousands of years to do this thing. But there are people that tried to, in an attempt to get along with science because they thought they had to bow to science. Theologians thought that they had to give the way to the scientific community that just knew everything, right? They were the know-it-alls. There are some people of the early 20th century, some theologians that I'm really fond of, in fact, that ascribe to a long creation and a gap theory and things like that. And the only explanation for that, the scripture and the text doesn't support what they're saying. They have to speculate lots of things in order for that to be made true, but they thought they had to get along with the scientific community. We're now learning, all of the creationists in the world now that have studied any of this stuff, and I've read so many books on creation. I mean, you guys have heard of Ken Ham and the Creation Research Institute and the Institute for Creation Research. So there's CRI and ICR, and all those. And right up here in Paradise lives Pat Roy, who used to work at ICR down in San Diego, and he teaches things at the Evangelical Free Church up there in Paradise. Has a whole bunch of information on creation. And, it was kind of like a major thing, like a hobby to me for a few years. So I had all kinds of books and videos and on all of this. And what we're finding nowadays is that science has changed so many things so many times that it's starting to look like they should have just read the Bible. And they would have cut to the chase, a lot of it, because they're starting to kind of come around now in many things to where they're saying, actually, the way that kind of sounds better. And there are many people that have gone from being total humanistic evolutionists to becoming creationists, even though they don't believe in the same God we do. There had to be a clockmaker. So there are many in the scientific community now that are at least coming over to some sort of someone created it. And that's a step in the right direction. And they might think it was aliens or something, yeah.
Did they disqualify one of the planets, no longer a planet, Pluto?
Yeah, when I was in school, Pluto was a planet. Now they're saying it's not, right? Was it Pluto?
Yes.
Yeah.
Not saying that it's not a planet.
That it's not a planet, it's some,
It's discovered other things, after this.
lots of things.
And then I think Mount St. Helens, after the explosion, I think that really opened eyes to a lot of scientists to see
That was big.
what God can do with an explosion like that and just reform and create something totally, so drastic in a matter of seconds to where before it's, that would take millions of years, and here God will run an explosion with what was created.
Right.
So just the way he speaks, he creates, and it could be instantly.
Right.
Not forever.
And the Grand Canyon backs up the global flood and the catastrophic event killing off all kinds of things, because there's layers in the fossil layers in the Grand Canyon. And so those people who were studying the Grand Canyon and the fossil layers and all that kind of stuff, and then when Mount St. Helens happened, they went, oh, yeah, quick things like this. And also when they were drilling down through ice up in the North Pole, and they were looking at these cores, how you can take a core sample out of the earth, and they brought out this ice, and it was in these long core things, and they had it, this was so many feet deep, this was so many feet deep, and they're seeing layers of rings, and they're counting these rings like the ring on a tree, and saying that that's how many years. As they go deeper, that's how it's built up, right? Well, there was one of these drilling things that all of a sudden they hit something hard. What is this? And they ended up getting down there to it and bringing it up, and it was a World War II bomber. So how'd that happen? Then they had to rethink, so a freeze layer, a lighter color ice, and the darker color ice, lighter color ice, darker color ice, and on. Maybe it doesn't mean years. Maybe it means a really cold day, not so cold day. Really, and they went, okay. And some bomber flew in there and crashed back in World War II, and it is buried in the ice over the next 50 years, and they find this... What is that down there? And here's this old bomber down there. So see, it just really shoots holes in the theories of a lot of things. When I was in school, they had all of these different man. Remember these? The Neanderthal man. There was this dude called the Nebraska man. Does anyone remember Nebraska man? Okay, named Nebraska man because of this gravel pit area in Nebraska where they found these bones and stuff, right? Well, Nebraska man in the textbooks, in the science textbooks that were in our schools, that our tax dollars paid to put it in there, is worded in such a way that it said, this was Nebraska man, and had a drawing of him, what he looked like. He was a little bit morphed, kind of not quite looking all human yet, but kind of human. He was Homo sapien. But and this was his wife, and this was the kind of clothing that they wore, probably, and these were the tools that they used to do their daily things and their hunt and their hunter-gatherer kind of thing that they were starting to do and all that, right? That whole thing, you talk about speculating. All that was artist's rendition of an idea, an imagination of an artist that drew all that stuff, yet it was in our textbooks as if they had proof. All they had was a tooth. All they had was a tooth, and from that tooth they made up Nebraska man. Later on, that tooth was found to be from a pig. But yet our tax dollars paid for putting those textbooks in the schools back in the 60s, the 50s and 60s, and so the kids have been taught that and thought it was true. And oh, by the way, there's not enough money for new ones, so we're just going to keep teaching it. What? Even after we have proof that it's false, they keep teaching it. See?
Still teaching.
They're still teaching about Nebraska man.
Still teaching. Not sure in college, they still teach the stages of the man.
But yet, if you spend enough money, society thinks that you've got a diploma and you've learned something. You learned something, all right. What is it that you're learning? It's not very valuable. It's not truth. It's just a bunch of, ideas that people had. So see, what I'm saying is this is happening, and I'm not saying let's pull all the kids out of the schools and become homeschoolers. That's not what I'm suggesting. I'm just saying that maybe parents and grandparents should get more involved in the school districts and say, hey, we need some curriculum that can back up the stuff that they're teaching them, or teach it to them as theory. And if you're going to teach it to them as theory, there are other theories that are at least as valid. You need to teach those too. If you're going to teach one theory, teach the other theory, especially if it makes more sense than the one that you want to teach. So maybe we should get involved in that. Anyway, that's just, a little preachy there, but, and I'm not meaning to be political, but it's just kind of funny, I think. So anyway, where else did I leave off? Okay, all this happened. Let the earth bring forth grass. All this happened. I was waiting for someone to chuckle over that, but okay, all right. So all this happened before the creation of the sun, the fourth day of creation, and the plants must have had sufficient nourishment because of the light God had created before the sun and the moon, but it was only, although plants could go 24 hours without sunlight, that's not a problem. But Revelation tells us of a coming day when we won't need the sun, moon, or stars any longer. In Revelation 21:23, there's no reason why God couldn't have started creation in the same way that He'll end it, with Him being the light. Some scientists now say life on Earth began when immense meteorites carrying amino acids impacted Earth at a time when the sun was cooler and the Earth was a watery ball covered with ice up to 1,000 feet thick. I don't know where they get that idea, but anyway. The idea is that a meteor hits the ice, breaks through, and seeds the water underneath with the amino acids that are on this meteorite, right? So how did the meteor get the amino acids, and where did the meteor come from, was my question whenever I read that. Where'd that come from then? Who sent it? So, however the process was triggered, the scientists said life on Earth began in a geological instant. Now, how they define a geological instant as in geological terms, it was a very short period of time. And to them, in this, a geological instant, they just mean less than 10 million years. That's a geological instant to these people. It's less than 10 million years, a short period of time, because, creation is billions of years old, right? Really? Okay, you gotta, it's older and older and older every year, according to these people. But there are fewer and fewer people staying in that camp every year, too. Many are coming out of it and saying, no, I think there was a watchmaker somewhere, somebody created it all. And they're still teaching, right? So anyway, the earth brought forth grass, the herb that yields seed, and the tree that yields fruit whose seed is in itself. The plants were created not as seeds. Pay attention to that. The plants were not seeds that became plants. First, the plants were created. Which came first, the plant or the seed? The plant came first. Exactly, the chicken came first. So anyway, they were created as mature plants having the appearance of age. That's another thing that I want you to hold on to as we look at this. When they were created, they had the appearance of age. How much age doesn't matter. Week, 2 months, a year. These things were created with the appearance of age. That means, how long does it take a tree to get so big? Well, those trees, it didn't take but an instant. They had the appearance of age. God made the landscape. He didn't sit there and seed it and wait for it to grow until it became that. Now I'll go on to my next thing. He created with the appearance of age. And we see that with seed in them. So that they are mature, because only the mature plants have the fruit that have seeds in them. So they're already full grown. That's the point that we need to make sure and hang on to. The chicken really did come before the egg. According to its kind. That's another phrase that you need to hold on to and watch as we go through this. According to its kind. This phrase appears 10 times in Genesis chapter 1. And it means God allows variation within a kind. That's called microevolution. Okay? God allows for variation within a kind. But something of one kind will never develop into something of another kind. That would be macroevolution, and that has never been shown to actually exist. I've never found that missing link in any of that stuff. Kinds stay as kinds. Little within variances, you can breed animals and that can breed together different species of dogs, and come up with a new species of dog. You can do that with plants too. But a plant's never going to become a dog. It's just not going to happen. There's kinds, and even kinds of animals are never going to become a different kind. A dog's never going to become a cat. No matter what the cartoons show, there's no cat dog. All right. So, now we can look at verses 14 to 19, unless someone has something else on that. Okay. 14 through 19, and God said, "Let there be lights in the expanse of the sky to separate the day from the night, and let them serve as signs to mark seasons and days and years. And let them be lights in the expanse of the sky to give light on the earth." And it was so. God made two great lights, the greater light to govern the day, and the lesser light to govern the night. He also made the stars. God set them in the expanse of the sky to give light on the earth, to govern the day and the night, and to separate light from darkness. And God saw that it was good. And there was Erev, and there was Boker on the fourth day. All right, so this fourth day is really interesting too, and you could spend a lot more time on it than what I will. Let me get through this really fast. Let them be for signs and seasons. So God made the sun and the moon, lights in the firmament, and we know that the moon just reflects the sun, and we know that the stars that are actually, most of them out there that are stars are suns that are way out there, right? Okay, but sometimes planets are out there and they're also reflecting the suns. So they kind of look like stars too. But only the stars actually have light in themselves and are producing light. But God put them there. That's the point. He put them in the places that they are there, and He put them to govern and to mark. So that's something for us to pick up on, because these lights in the firmament of the heavens are signs, to be for signs and seasons, it said. So since the beginning, you'll know that man has used God's provision of the sun and the moon and the stars to mark and measure time and direction. We find our direction navigating on the ocean and on the land and everything, all because of these celestial bodies that are out there in space around us. So God set them in the firmament of the heavens. He set them, so He knew exactly how far, this is important, He knew how far to set the sun from the earth. A few million miles, which a million miles, that's not very far. That's like the less than 10 million years in a geological instant. A million miles in space is like a step in space, But just a few million miles either direction, and life couldn't exist on this planet the way it does. It just couldn't. It wouldn't be able to support it. So God knew right where to put it there on purpose, and that would help sustain it. Let them be for signs and seasons. When God set the lights in the heavens to be for signs, it probably includes what we commonly call the zodiac. Now, don't start shooting me here, what we commonly call the zodiac is not evil. What people do with it is. You know, the ancient Hebrews called it the Mazzaroth. It's been around for a long time. The Mazzaroth, and then it became the zodiac in some other nations and everything. And you think that God doesn't know about that and that He didn't plan it? All you have to do is read Job 38, 31 through 33. I'll read it to you right now. In Job, God said to Job, this was God talking to Job during this section, right? And He said, "Can you bind the chains of the Pleiades? Can you loosen Orion's belt? Can you bring forth the constellations and their seasons, or lead out the bear and its cubs? Do you know the laws of the heavens? Can you set up God's dominion over the earth?" See, and this was part of God's talk to Job. You're not in charge. You don't know what's going on or anything. But the point is, He names these things that in Job's day, and we know that Job is one of the oldest books in the Old Testament. And Job was likely a contemporary with Abraham in time. So he wasn't a Jew later on. He was a pre-Jew guy that feared God and honored God. All right. So clear back in Abraham's day, Job's day or whatever, they already were calling the celestial bodies, the groupings of the constellations up there, by the same names that we still call them today. That's important for us to catch in that the Bible backs that up. And God even said it. So He didn't say, don't call them that, or that's evil to start naming stars. No, God used it. He says, can you loosen Orion's belt? Really? There's Orion's belt is up there. And the Pleiades, can you move them? Can you do any of that stuff? So, significantly, the sequence of the zodiac, the sequence when you follow it around the circle, right? I don't know if you guys have ever even looked at it, but there's the 12 symbols in the zodiac, right? There's 12 symbols, and the Mazzaroth of the Hebrew was the same, and they're the same symbols, by the way. So, in every language and culture around the world, even if specific names of the constellations change because of language, they still point to the same dots in the sky. And we go back into ancient cultures, and they still called them the same things. So, this suggests that this was a known thing that mankind knew about, these different constellations and the 12 markings around the zodiac or Mazzaroth prior to Babel. Because when God confused the languages and they all went out and did different directions, they took that information with them. Because all these ancient cultures still have the same 12 points and they're the same ones, and they're in the same order, even if they changed the names. Now that is very interesting, I think. Because God put it there as signs for seasons and markings and all these kinds of things. And I think there's another theory behind it, and I don't have nearly enough time or notes to be able to explain it. But I believe that part of the Mazzaroth tells the gospel of the New Testament. The order of the things. And if I could someday get a hold of that, maybe I'll share it with you. But it's a very interesting thing, because the zodiac is that same thing. But oh, you were born under this star. Come on, let's not get all into that. But there is meaning. There is something behind it, and it does have a purpose. There's a reason for it. Most of us don't know what it is, and we get it mixed up, and it's not horoscope. It's not for that. But anyway, I'll leave that off today, and that's as far as we'll go in it. But just remember that's pretty interesting. And next time we'll pick up and talk about the 5th day of creation next week. All right? So we're 4 days into the creation of the world now. Let's close in prayer. Heavenly Father, we thank you for your word. We thank you for making it interesting to us. and telling us things that you knew all along, and letting us come to the revelation of these things even these many years later. Boost our faith with what we learn and keep us hungry for your word. And we look forward to what you'll teach us later out of another book in the next hour. We thank you so much, and it's through Jesus Christ our Lord we pray. Amen.